Hello and welcome to Visible Voices. The Visible Project is a Leeds-based initiative aimed at improving the outcomes of adults that have experienced any form of child sexual abuse. The Visible Project is made up of two equally important groups. The Strategic Steering Group, which consists of both statutory and voluntary organisations within Leeds, and the Visible Leadership Reference Group. This podcast is by Visible Leadership Reference Group that consists of people who have experienced any form of child sexual abuse, otherwise known as CSA survivors. Names may or may not be used throughout this series. In this episode, you'll hear myself and another member from the Visible Leadership Reference Group discussing our experiences of disclosure. By first disclosure, we mean when we first tell someone about our abuse experiences. This is our discussion. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about first disclosure.
Okay, so what do you mean by that?
Good question. Yes, first disclosure is obviously very different for everyone. So should we start right at the beginning and maybe go for the first disclosure with ourselves?
So are we talking about, I guess disclosure can mean either admitting it to yourself what's happened or telling somebody. So it could be a family member, it could be a professional. So there's disclosure to ourselves and disclosure to other people, and they can be very, very different.
Yes.
And at very different times.
Should we try and do the whole lot?
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Because I think the first disclosure to self as well, I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I think it's important for us to acknowledge there's only like two of us here, and our experience is going to be very, very different, and everybody else's is going to be very different. So we're only giving examples. They could be completely different with everybody else.
Yes, this is our own lived experience.
Yeah. But hopefully it gives people an insight into the complexities of it, because for me, it wasn't an easy thing or a straightforward thing. Maybe yours was different to mine, but maybe it was less complicated.
To be honest, it was very complicated.
And then, so what about your first disclosure to yourself? Was it different to when you disclosed to somebody else?
It was, to be honest, mine happened at the same time,
Right.
because I was in counselling. It occurred between the ages of 10, 11 and 16, 17. I'm always a bit vague on date because that's how my mind works. But my first disclosure was because I was in counselling because I'd become very wayward in my teen year because of a direct result of the CSA. I ended up on drugs and just being a totally unruly and teenager that my parents were just at their wits' end. And I ended up going to a certain group, social hobby group. I'm not going to elaborate. And I ended up being caught taking drugs and with my friends. So we were sent home, and as we were sent home, our parents were told why we were being sent home. And they said, my mother said, what should I do from here? And they said, we recommend you take your daughter to counselling.
Right.
Not take her, but actually let her have counselling. So I started psychotherapy at the age of 18,
Right.
which was initially about the drugs. And within the first two sessions, what I did was talk about my own life. And I remember lots of tears and just really superficial stuff that any teenager would be complaining about as counsellor. And then luckily, because it was so long ago in the 80s, my counsellor, it's person-led counsellor now, but this counsellor was brilliant because he just went, stop all your, just stop and listen. Have you ever been abused? And I was like, no, I haven't. Oh, woe me in school, or woe, my mate did this, and all sort of the current recent stuff. And then he made me just stop and go, no, stop. Let me just tell you again or ask you again, have you been abused? And he said, think about that for a second. And obviously, because I didn't know at the age that it happened what the words sexual abuse were, I didn't even correlate the two incidents, or the several incidents over years, but I didn't sort of click that what he was saying now and what had happened to me for so many years was sexual abuse. I just haven't put the two together. So that was my first disclosure, really, to myself, because that's when the penny dropped, because all the memories, oh, right, it's got a name. God, why didn't I think that? I know what sex is. I'm 18. Why didn't I think of sexual abuse? But I suppose that was the generation that I grew up in, that it wasn't a discussed issue. You just suppressed it and got on. And it was interfamilial abuse that made it really difficult, because he then said, right, you either tell them yourself or you get them to come here. Because I was like, oh no, I can't tell them. My parents, my dad will go nuts at me. Unnecessary guilt, shame. And then he said, right, how about we bring them in? And we talk, I sit here with you, with your parents, and we talk to them together. And the fear and dread just came over me. I was like, that's never going to happen either. So I never went back to that psychotherapist. Mm. But what I did do is, it's psychoanalyst, not psychotherapist, psychoanalyst. But what I did do was I told my parents myself.
From my point of view, I can understand why you didn't go back, whether it's right or wrong, but I've just picked up from what you've said, so you can correct me. But I felt that it was putting some pressure on you, that you should tell your parents, but you're 18. It should have been your choice, whether you told your parents or not.
Actually, I think I'm 17.
Right.
Because I was I was a child, so I must have been right. So, yeah, again, dates.
Yes.
Go out the window with me sometimes.
What was his reaction when you sort of said, yeah, this is what's happened to me? That's what it's called.
When the psychoanalyst said it.
Was it helpful how he responded?
He was great. He let me talk around it. He let me cry. He did everything. I can't actually remember because it was so long ago. Mm. And in a way, I'm lucky in that way that I was disclosing at such a young age, because the majority of people I know who have been sexually abused, they've suppressed the memory for, until they're in their 30s.
Looking back at it now from what you can remember, could he have handled it better for you? Or was that a helpful way that was it helpful that he actually asked you?
I think in professional terms, it was probably really inappropriate to actually put me on the spot and then bring my parents in. But I suppose it's funny, isn't it? It's you can never say what's right and wrong, because it's such a grey area, this.
But was it helpful for you? Was it right for you, do you think?
In a way, I believe now it was. And at the time, yes, I was put on the spot, but I think he knew by then, it was our third session, and I think he knew I could handle it. And maybe that was an educated decision. I can't talk for him, obviously. But actually, I'm really grateful that he did push it to that extent, because I think I would have varied it a lot more if he hadn't been so persistent. And I'm a firm believer in early intervention is key.
Am I okay to ask you another question?
Of course, yeah.
Linking with first disclosures, how was that when you disclosed to your parents?
That was terrible. I was scared, I was shaking, but I knew it was the right thing to do.
And did you initiate that? Whereas in therapy, he initiated the conversation. This with your parents, did you initiate the conversation?
I did.
Wow.
Yeah, I was really brave. Mm-hmm. I'm starting to well up a bit now.
You can stop whenever you want. Could stop when it
Yeah. It's obviously a memory that I'll never forget, because I remember the look of disgust on my dad's face. He's passed now, so, and I remember,
Did you interpret that as a disgust of you?
yeah, I did. And also I knew that he wouldn't be able to handle that. He was terrible with emotion anyway. He was from a different culture, and, little children should be seen, not heard, sort of thing. But, yeah, it was really, I could see how I knew it was going to be painful for him, more painful than it was for me. And I took on his guilt and shame in the look on his face. I will never, I can still picture it very clearly now. And I probably need to do
that. Just said that you still, I get the impression you're still holding that.
Yeah.
And you're still holding that fear and shame, which you have, me saying it ain't going to make any difference, but you have no need to hold that fear and shame. That's not your fear or shame. But I can tell that it's still in you.
Yeah.
That's your dad's response. Did he believe you?
Yeah, he did. They both did straight away. But what they did very sensibly, they said that they would have a talk about it and come back to me. And if I had any more questions or anything I wanted to share, they would be all open. So they kind of closed it down for that moment because they couldn't cope with it. And I remember that they said, you can go now. And I was crying, I
think that shows me what the kind of culture it was, isn't it? How in your household you can go, and you've just shared this, and it's like, you can go now. You're this.
They took total control of it. But I remember leaving that room and I felt so powerful. Even though, because it was inbred, the culture was inbred within me and within our family, like I said. So
it could have had such the opposite effect, feeling powerless.
Yeah.
Like, go away now, we'll talk about it. But actually it empowered you.
Yeah.
And you felt in control and powerful.
I think because I had been brought up with that sort of level of control and dominance, that it was just, I expected that. I anticipated that. I'd foreseen that was going to happen. So when I left that room, the lounge of our house, and I went upstairs, I just felt on top of the world, because I had been suppressing it for so many years, not only by doing drugs, but also before that, I've been bulimic for years as well, which was all, in hindsight, it's very easy to see that it was all part of the abuse and me trying to regain control.
So did it make things make sense for you?
Yeah. Not only did it make sense, but I was so, it was such a breakthrough in me to be so honest, because all I'd done was lie. I've lied about my drug intake. I'd lied about making myself sick before that. And it was all like that, after that, it was just the truth. And then they came back to me the week after, or I don't know, days after, but they came back and they said, right, we've approached the person who it was, and they denied it. And at that point, I started swearing and proper shouting, and I was, I was not a shouty, sweary girl, not in front of my parents at least, but I was never an angry child. And I was so adamant, I don't care what you believe, you can they know what happened, I know what happened. And I was really adamant that I don't care what you think, it's about me, none of this, I don't care. So yeah, again, another powerful.
Wow. And again, that could have been so different. Somebody's like, right, I must have remembered it wrong, I must have got it wrong, or that kind of thing.
Doubt. I was so, and because of my reaction, they said later, again, I don't know how long later, but they said, because of your reaction, you were telling the truth, because I've never seen you so animated.
And again, that could have been different. They could have stuck with the adult or the family member. And I've heard, and people I've known have been called liars for saying things and be told that they're making things up and that kind of thing. So that's really powerful again, that they accepted what you said.
Yeah. I was lucky, and I was lucky because I was younger. And when I hear that people are treated like that later or dismissed, or that first disclosure is so important. Not only to yourself.
I think it can make or break somebody.
Yeah, I agree. And it can take years from knowing what happened in your head to what, to you telling someone else, because that's hard, particularly as the people you usually tell know the person or know you so well because they're either your friends, family, or your closest ally.
And I don't know about you, but if somebody you talk to and you tell them that this has been your history, your experience, when you look at them, you think that you can see them, a mind working going, I think you knew it is. And I'd always go, it's not my dad. Yes. I didn't want anybody to think anything bad about my dad because it wasn't my dad.
Yeah.
I didn't want anybody to just think, well, she hadn't said who, so it could be this person, it could be this, it could be that. And it's like, my thing will be, but it won't be dad. It won't be dad.
Yeah, I do the same because I don't want people thinking bad of him. He wasn't a tyrant. He was culturally different and impacted by the Second World War because he came to Britain as a refugee. So yeah, I agree.
I do think, even though people don't voice it, I think when you do disclose, that's the first thing that you think they're thinking, who is it? Who is it?
Yeah.
And I know my experiences, like I said, I say something that it won't be dad.
Yeah.
It won't be dad.
And sometimes I've disclosed to people and it's taken ages to actually say who it is as well, or never at all.
I haven't told anybody who it is. The only people that know who it is my therapist and the police.
Yeah. I'm very rarely.
And I do get some stick, particularly from, not stick, but I do get stick. Yeah, I want to call it stick from my mum because she thinks I'm being cruel by not telling her who it is. And so, but my disclosure route was very, very different to yours. I can think, obviously I knew what happened when I was little, but I put it into a box in my mind. I had enough trouble dealing with everyday things, being at school, who I was. I developed an eating disorder, was treated for that because it was like 4 stone when I was 20 and all those kind of things. So the past was locked in the past. Nobody ever asked me about that. I was too busy trying to get through each day with my eating disorder, with my OCD. Not mine. With the eating disorder I was experiencing and my behaviours and my thoughts and processes. I didn't like people. I had to stay away from people. So I was struggling with life. I didn't connect it and nobody around me connected it with my early experience. It wasn't till I was in my 30s and I was still struggling with an eating disorder, but it slightly changed. I still had an OCD and that kind of thing. And I asked for psychotherapy. And for a long time at the beginning of therapy, all I would talk about was food and exercise and everything like that. And it was like, after a long time, he just said, when are you going to stop talking about food? And like, I thought that's what we're here for. Because I'd learned with eating disorder services and stuff, you just talk about food. Once you get a healthy diet or once you maintain your weight, everything will be all right. And that's what I learned. And he's like, right, we're going to stop talking about food and exercise now. And we looked at how my fear of people, why I hated myself and all those kind of things. And I told him stuff about what happened when I was little that I didn't like, but it was just me making a mountain out of a molehill because I'm an awkward child and this, that and other. And he went, that's actually sexual abuse. I'm like, no, it's not. No, it's not. It's just something I didn't like. He's like, it is. And it took me and he said, how would you describe it as an adult then? I'm like, no, it's just what happened when I was little. and I wanted to minimize it so much. And it took me a long time to accept the terminology he was using was actually right. It wasn't how you describe what happened when I was little was child sexual abuse and rape. And it took me a long time to accept that, because I remember somebody who was very close to me. Nobody knew about this at all. I didn't share anything on it with my therapist, but a friend once asked me, I'd been in therapy for a while, and she said, "You're being sexually abused as a child." She just came out with it, and I went, "Depends who you ask." And she said, "You?" I'm like, "Oh, no," because I was still in denial about it. And she went, "What about your therapist?" I went, "Oh, yeah, I think so." Because I'd got to that stage where, if you want to think about it like that, you think about it like that, I'll accept it. But I accepted it in my head. Mm. And then a few years later, so we're talking about years, a few years later, I can remember it very, very clearly. How you say, this is like maybe over 10 years ago. It was Boxing Day. I'd got back from the gym. So still in my exercise phase. And I was sitting in front of the fire, so it was cold. And my mum said, I was ranting and raving that I hadn't enjoyed the gym. And she was like, "Why?" And I went, "Because it was a male instructor and it wasn't meant to be him. It was meant to be," and I said Julie or Sarah or something like that, and said it was meant to be them and it wasn't. It was this man. And I wasn't expecting that. And she was like, "Well, let's face it. If it were any man, you wouldn't like it, would you?" And she went, "Has anybody ever done anything to you?" And I was, and my thinking had changed through therapy. And I got to the stage where I'm like, "Yes, no, yes, no, I don't want to admit it. No, don't let me think about it. Don't. Yes, no, leave it. I'm not talking about it."
Wow.
And it had got, so I went through stages of acceptance of it.
So do you mean in that first disclosure, that first conversation, you were like, yes?
Yeah. Well, like, my mum was saying, she went, "Did anybody do anything?" I'm like, "Yeah, no, they didn't. Yes, no, I don't want to talk about it. Oh, no." And so I didn't want to, but I admitted it to her and said, "I'm not talking about it anymore." So my first disclosure was, yes, something has happened when I was young, but I'm not talking about it. So she didn't know what, who, when. Over time, I've sort of like shared as much as I can and sort of like said, this was because she's wanted to know, when did I protect you? When didn't I look after you? And this, and I'm like, and I'd say, this was the age range I was, and that kind of thing. But the first disclosure was very, yes, no, I don't want to talk about it, end of. And I refused to speak about it after that. So.
Is that how it stands now?
Yeah. My mum, because my dad had died at the time, my mum, like I say, I've told her little bits. Basically, she knows what age I was, but I won't tell her anymore. And she told my sister, so I didn't have to. In fact, my mum told everybody else. My mum told my sister, my mum told my GP, because nobody knew that. It was only between me and my therapist and what my friend had asked me.
How did you feel about that?
I knew my mum can't keep anything to herself, which is, I expected the text from my sister saying, "My mum's told me what happened. I'm here if you want." And it's like, right, okay. So just put thank you, because didn't have to deal with that. And a few months later, I had an appointment with my GP about something completely different. And I just had to see, because she went, "Have you told him?" "No." I said, "Are you sure?" "Oh, yeah, I did. I told him last time I went." So then sort of like, I haven't really had to say anything to anybody, because my mum just told people.
But she doesn't know the full extent, or she just knows the CSA happened.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's a can of worms in itself.
Yeah. And I know, we have had family therapy, and I know that she does feel as if she wants to know, and she feels that I'm being cruel by not telling her. But I don't want to for a number of reasons, but she doesn't like the fact that it's my information and it's up to me whether I share it with her or not. She feels that I'm being quite cruel. And I know it's one thing that does upset her and stuff. So I've sort of like disclosed, but not fully disclosed.
Or not gone into detail.
Yeah, as much as what she'd want. The only thing I've said is she did ask, but she went, please tell me it's not your dad. And I went, no, it's not. But sometimes she does say like stuff. She does sort of like ask questions and stuff like that, which makes me on edge all the time. I think she's going to say something, but I've got used to it over the time. And I feel comfortable saying I don't want to talk about it. So
and why do you think in your body now, or your mind rather, why do you think you don't want to tell your mum? I'm not trying to force you.
Yeah, no. Oh no, I know why. I know why I don't want to tell her, because like I said, my mum's very vocal. She's a gossip.
Yeah.
And if she knows
One reason.
Yeah, if she knows who it is, everybody else will.
Yeah.
But also I have that fear, like your experience. My mum will hunt them down, confront them, and they'll go, no, it happened.
Yeah, and it's out of your control.
And then I fear people believing them and not me. Even though I know 100% what happened, I fear that person will say and will approach me and go, why are you saying those things about me? And I don't want that person near me. So I fear the consequence if I disclose more. Because even though my mum said, I won't do all about it, just tell me, I just need to know. I don't believe that, because as a parent, if something happens to the child, you're not just going to let that ride, are you?
No, but I don't know. It depends on the parent.
I think.
And it depends on their motives to know.
And I think at some point, I will end up telling her who it is, but I'm not ready to cope with my perceived fallout the minute I don't feel strong enough to face that person if they approach me and said, why are you saying these lies? And I don't feel strong enough to deal with my mum saying, they've said, you're making it up, it's nothing, because I don't think anybody's going to admit to what they've done. So I don't feel that I'm at a stage where I want to face that conversation at the minute. So that's why I'm choosing
not to
fully disclose.
Yeah.
Thank you to our members for that discussion, and thank you to all of you for listening to Visible Voices. Please join us again next time, where we'll be talking about comorbidities. We hope you can join us then. Toodle pip! Thank you for listening to this episode. We hope you found Visible Voices interesting, thought-provoking and helpful. Visible Voices was created and delivered by the Visible Leadership Reference Group. Special thanks to all those that contributed today. Western Studios Leeds Limited for facilitating the podcast. The music was produced by Mark Parvin, aka Marvin Parks. To find out more about the Visible Project, go to visibleproject.org.uk. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. If the content of this has affected you and you live in Leeds, please go to the child abuse subsection of the Mindwell website, mindwell-leeds.org.uk.